Hello and welcome to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart. And today we have an intriguing story. UAPs recorded and analysed off the coast of Long Island, just to the east of New York. Two twin brothers, Gerry and John Tedesco, are Long Island natives. Both of them are electrical engineers. They're both passionately interested in science, and as it happens, they also have a very close interest in UFOs, UAPs. Now, they're concerned a few years ago about possible cancer clusters on Long Island, and so they build a mobile lab in an RV to monitor atmospheric smog and to also research electromagnetic emissions such as those from cell phone towers. But in 2021, as they're making their research plan, they read the report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's America's intelligence boss, the chief intelligence czar in the United States. And the ODNI made an extraordinary declaration back in 2021 that after 70 years of denial about the existence of the reality of UFOs, not only did the ODNI confirm they are real, they acknowledged they are. UAPs are a threat to flight safety and a possible risk to national security. And it's fair to say this finding by the ODNI sent their research in a completely different and, as it happens, very fruitful direction. John and Gerry teamed up with another Long Island native, Donna Nardo, a journalist, investigator, and professional communications expert who's also interested in science and UFOs. They started in 2022 and they continued through to July 2023. And in August this year, they achieved the almost impossible task of getting a field research study on UFOs, UAPs, off the coast of Long Island, peer-reviewed and published in the Open Journal of Applied Sciences. Their report, which is now a book called Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky, is groundbreaking. And I know their research has captured the attention of some very influential scientists and officials, including in Homeland Security and the FBI, who at the moment do not publicly acknowledge their very, very close interest in this subject. They're looking much closer at the UAP mystery than they currently care to publicly admit. And if you see just how close this site where the Tedescos have been viewing just off the coast of North Long Island is to, say, the approaches to JFK International Airport, and of course one of America's biggest cities, New York City, you'd understand why there is a public interest national security risk here. So the Journal of Applied Sciences paper presents the findings from their 10-month field study at the Robert Moses State Park on the south shore of Long Island. Their objective was to determine if unknown aerial phenomena existed over this coastal location, and if so, to study it. And boy, have they done well. I want to tell you about a product that happily is sponsoring Reality Check, and which also addresses some of the egregious food that you Americans happen to eat. And it's all about the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. The theory that is pushed by the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3 product is that there is a potential toxin in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for some considerable time. One day I will do a story on Reality Check about the American ultra-processed food diet and why I fear for this beautiful country that it seems to be suffering from the appalling food that it eats, and it needs a fix. Well, maybe that fix is the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. There's a Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, who is saying that there's a potential toxin in our food that's causing huge digestive issues, and it's affecting millions of people worldwide. The warning signs include weight gain, fatigue, digestive disorder, stiff joints, even skin problems. And Dr. Gundry explains that these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. And I can assure you that the damage that we're talking about is probably caused by these supposed health foods, and it's far from normal. The good news is you can fix this problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can find this yourself at the gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. And if you go there, you'll find that after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public for free, and it's uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross and click on the link in the description below. Okay, let's get into the show. So, guys, welcome to Reality Check. And I suppose to kick off, how far away is this site where you were doing your study from the location that Navy pilots off the east coast of the US were seeing anomalous objects frequently, and as I understand it, still do?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be here, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all of us. And the Navy sightings were, I believe, down around the Virginia area, and further down, I guess, Jacksonville, off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Whiskey
72 was the Virginia area.
Right, is what they classified it as.
The training area.
The information that we have and what we've heard back from Ryan Graves is that, these things have been spotted literally 10 miles off the shore of Virginia and further out. Objects moving, east to west. I'm sorry, west to east in this case. Nothing that moved back over land. So we had chosen Robert Moses State Park because the island extends literally from the main coastline, New Jersey, and the city, about 140, 150 miles, from the coast. And where we're situated, we're roughly about 55 miles at that point. So we're looking 55 miles out at sea in a southwest direction, and literally about 55 miles from the deep water trench. So we have a pretty good vantage point, especially using our long range sensors, the X-band radar system that we have, that we got FCC clearance for as experimental use, and some of the hyperspectral cameras.
Let's cut to the quick. Donna, maybe you can answer this.
Yes.
Let's do some quick, short answers. Are these objects, you all believe, intelligently controlled on the basis of the evidence you've uncovered?
I think that there is a possibility that indeed they are, and I think John, Gerry, and I feel that way.
Are they a technology?
I think that there's a possibility that is definitely among the numerous possibilities, and I think, again, that's a hypothesis that John, Gerry, and I share.
And I'll throw this one open to all of you. Is this evidence of a non-human intelligence?
I think it's potential evidence of non-human intelligence. I mean, it appears to show awareness. It appears to show some intelligent actions. At times, occasionally you'll see it meander along the shoreline, these objects, or they'll loiter along the shoreline. But they also would also show an awareness of us being out there,
Yeah,
and actually responds to some of the things we're doing.
Right. And we've used LiDAR. We've used long range torches, both visible light and invisible light, in the infrared, and we've had reactions. We have almost like a form of acknowledgement or communications.
So when you say acknowledgement, what do you mean? What happens?
So in one particular case, we had an object that once we hit it with a infrared torch, we noticed that in the night vision cameras, this object suddenly moved its position away from the torch.
It seemed to evade
it evaded the light, and it did it several times.
Look, my favorite video of all of the ones you've got, and it's called the Peekaboo video.
Yes.
Um, and there's a road sign. Is this shot on infrared? There's a road sign, and you see a whitish orb coming out from behind the road sign. So obviously not far away from you. It's on the beach, and it seems to be coming out, peeking at you, and then tucking back behind the sign again.
Yes, yes, it was very unusual that night. It's we were just preparing the instrumentation and setting up the infrared cameras, and we noticed in the recording that the cameras itself had recorded an object that literally appeared from the right side of the sign. And as I moved the camera back to that direction, because I caught this in the camera at the corner of my eye, and I said I saw something, and I tracked this object. As I focused the camera on it, the object moved suddenly behind the sign again. And it did this several times. As I moved the camera away, the object came out from behind the sign, and then was basically chasing it back and forth.
So that's an object that appears to know you're working with some kind of camera technology. It knows it's being monitored and it's trying to avoid being captured on camera.
That's what we believe. Yes, yes, that it did acknowledge, that it was being videotaped, or it's being tracked in some way, and it did try to evade that track.
And it did this about 4 times.
Mhm.
And Ross, this was a few months into phase one study. So these, whatever this phenomena is that we witnessed over and over again at that site, it had come to know us, but especially John, because John torched it with the high, heavy lights, and then these objects sometimes, as you said before, would react, they would blink, they would move away. So uh, I think that basically it was trying to communicate or give a notice to John, because it was John who spotted it.
Mhm. Right.
So
And
one thing I'm really interested in is there's a video that isn't within the period of your field study, but you very kindly shared it with me. It was shot, I think, on the 15th of July this year, and it appears to show a cube-like, certainly polyhedral object, and you've hit it with a LiDAR, which is a laser that can detect and range. It's a remote
Mhm.
sensing method. So you shine
Yes.
a LiDAR at it. What happens? Describe it to me.
Yes. So what happened is we had a refraction or reflection at times from this object. And the odd part about it is that the distance that was given back on the reflection didn't really make a lot of sense. It didn't correspond to an object that I initially thought was about, better than 500 meters from where I was. But I hit it twice in a clear line of sight, and the reflection back in both cases showed about 45 feet from where I was standing, which did make a whole lot of sense.
Was it 45 feet away?
It was not 45 feet. It had to have been much further than that. Why I got that kind of reflection back, is still kind of a mystery, and we're wondering whether this has something to do with gravitational lensing or some kind of distortion around these objects that is producing it.
Now, that's interesting in the implications because if it is gravitational lensing, it suggests that whatever the object is, it has a technology that's capable of distorting space-time, which of course is the long speculated Alcubierre theory to explain how these objects might be able to
Yeah.
move. Um, can I ask you this? Does the LiDAR allow you to assess whether the object had mass? Could it not just be a ball of plasma or perhaps some ball lightning or something like that?
That's difficult to say. I mean, a reflection from the object would indicate that there was some mass there,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know in what form. If it's more of a gaseous state, or if it's there's some solid to it. But there were times that we did get reflections, and other times we could get a reflection. It actually looked like the lidar beam itself uh, was never really making contact,
Right.
and almost in a form of distortion around it.
It sounds to me like you've got a non-human intelligence biting at your heels underneath the table there. Is that a little puppy or something you've got under the desk there?
Yes, yes. Just dying to get out here.
I feel the need to explain that to our audience. Otherwise, they're going to wonder what those
Yes.
strange noises are.
Sorry.
Can I just double check? There's an aeronautical chart in what you sent me, which shows your area of interest. And there's a big circle in red. And the thing I found interesting about this chart is it highlights, in my opinion, why UAP detection and monitoring matters and why good science, good research like yours into this phenomenon matters. Because where you are located, your area of interest, signaled by that circle of red on the chart,
Mhm.
that's one of the approach routes, isn't it, into JFK? That's an extraordinarily busy aircraft corridor. I don't understand how you guys can be seeing dozens of weird anomalous objects that apparently have mass moving around in an aircraft corridor, and this isn't a flight safety national security issue.
Right. It's we've seen this since we started this research, and we've been carefully examining the flight corridor. Now you have JFK to the west of us, and you have other airports, especially in Connecticut, doing a flyover. You have MacArthur Airport. You have LaGuardia as well to the west. So we have a very busy corridor of flights. But we've also seen these objects. We've seen these objects in combination with air travel. We'll be out there with a hyperspectral cameras, and we'll record these objects that seem to be at times in the flight paths of these aircraft.
Well, actually, there is one object.
The
What?
tic
What?
tac.
Yeah. Well, there is the Tic Tac object, which is extraordinary. I mean, you basically show, and it does. It looks like a Tic Tac underneath an aircraft. A cylindrical object passes right beside an aircraft at speed during the day. It's a very clear image. And the slow mo at around about 49 seconds shows how close it came to the aircraft. I held my breath when I saw this because I thought, one, you've captured a Tic Tac, and two, it's right beside an aircraft. I'm not surprised that Homeland Security and FBI and other agencies are interested in your work.
Another interesting feature of that video is in one frame of it, we had noticed that there was a flash, and when we froze it in that frame, you could see the object has a club shape to it, the larger end in the direction of travel, and it had two lights on the surface, or two shiny reflective surfaces or very reflective surfaces on top of it. And it only did this in one frame. It looked like it changed its orientation, and these two spots appear to be lights on it, but it's very different from an aircraft. It's got an odd shape to it. It's got this club shape to it.
Right. And what Gerald said too, it's only in one frame. Out of that 45 seconds, it's only in one frame of video that we saw this. So it's not navigation lights, which have a regular pattern to them, flash pattern, and that's predictable. We'll see that with most aircraft. This also had a reflective silhouette to it, almost like it appeared to be white, and you could see the rising sun underneath it. You could see the orange glow from the sun.
Give me a big picture here. You did this study over 10 months at this Robert Moses State Park on Long Island, just to the east of New York. How many objects of an anomalous nature did you see? And what's your rough conclusion? I mean, what do you think this is?
So in this case here, we've seen one that appeared to be almost like a tic tac shape. Most of the objects we've been seeing look like this, what we call spheroids, with a polyhedron center to it, something that looks like a cube or a rotating cube of some sort.
So this is very similar to the object described by FA-18 pilot Ryan Graves and his colleagues that were being seen by Navy pilots off the East Coast, just a bit further south, off the coast of Virginia. You're seeing, have you seen the phenomenon of I think it's the cube within the sphere?
what we've been seeing is it's more of a polyhedral shape to it, but depending on how many sides this polyhedron has, I mean, you could have a side that looks perfectly square and lit up, and if it's the more sides it has, the more rounder it becomes. So it could look like a sphere around a cube.
Right, and the spin rate is variable too. It's not, we've seen them rotate at a relatively slow pace, and then other times we'll see them where they seem to almost speed up. They accelerate, and when they accelerate, they get brighter and they almost look like they give off this intense light, this spheroid light, which it's the colors vary from orange, white, red, green. We've seen, and they can be pretty intense.
Can I ask, is there a do you ever see these objects with kind of a plasmatic hue around them, some kind of aura around them?
Yes,
A lot of scientists I've spoken to say that if there is a propulsion system, you might see a purplish hue. Have you seen that?
yes, yes. As a matter of
In fact,
fact,
we have
go
doing a
ahead.
video of one with a bluish or purplish hue around it.
Yeah, it's in a video, but we also have a UVC detection on it.
Hmm.
Now, the UVC is an ultraviolet C-band detector. These are very sensitive binary detectors, and we've had it out there. And in this particular case, while observing the object, our detector went off several times, indicating that there was a UV energy that was coming off of this object. UV is indicative of a plasma or some kind of a discharge, an arc of some sort that's giving off this particular wavelength.
Did you pick up any gamma radiation, any dangerous ionizing radiation?
Nothing like that. That might have been too far from it, maybe distance wise, but we were always monitoring for the higher energy radiation for alpha, beta, gamma, and so forth. That's not something that we were able to indicate.
Donna, can you do the broad brush for me? I'm really interested in getting a summary, a short encapsulating paragraph that summarizes the scope of your work and how many objects, how many anomalous events you recorded. Can you give me that rough pen sketch?
Well, I will say, with evidence to back up, 50, because we have approximately 50 video clips of various phenomena that we put into the bucket because of investigating all other options that they're unknowns. So while we may not know for sure what they are, we know they're not anything that's prosaic. They're not birds, not an airplane. It's we don't think that any of them were drones, at least not drones in the normal sense of drone, because no flashing lights, no sound. John's acoustics, Jerry's acoustics would pick that up, be able to see the flash.
Right. And what I do want to say too is that, we spent a good portion of this research looking for prosaic explanations for this stuff. So we examined, a lot of the flight travel, the various different aircrafts, the engine sounds, and
We,
we categorized a lot of that stuff.
yeah.
And like I said, we spent, I would say, probably at least 6 months making the determination whether or not it was a commercial aircraft, or something that we could, with a biomass of some sort, birds, bats, insects. So we tried to isolate as much as we could before putting this into that other bucket.
And one of the first things we did is we did an assessment of the scene. We actually mapped the flight corridor of the airport, which is 38 miles to the west. So most of the time we would steer away from that area. If it was, and most of the time we would spend most of our observations after 12, or most of the air flights would diminish down to virtually nothing.
And
And
that's
we
what
were still
we
seeing these objects.
phenomena was during that after 12, those after 12
Yes.
hours.
Right. The bulk of it, yes.
There
Yeah.
was outliers. But one other thing is John and Jerry, when they first started building the Nightcrawler, the telemetry vehicle, the platform to observe, and with all the sensors that we take to these beach sites to do the study. Um, John lives near an airport, so John spends considerable time also just hovering around that area, because you can look up into the sky, and they studied the planes, they studied the tracks, they studied the sounds, they studied how it looks with this camera, how it looks with the IR camera, how it looks with the planetary camera. So they had a pretty good idea of what would be a plane in the sky before we even got to Robert Moses State Park.
Right. From our vantage point, especially where we live, it's all you do is look at planes.
Sure.
Yeah, it gave us an advantage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even found some anomalies because they was showing me charts before the project got started. It was just in the preliminary stages. They were building the first Nightcrawler platform, and they were seeing things in the sky around the airport that they were already able to differentiate from a plane, from a helicopter.
Mhm.
You know what I find hilarious is you guys have essentially become the UAP Ghostbusters vehicle. This RV of yours sounds legendary. Tell me what you've got in there in the way of scientific equipment. It's quite an extraordinary vehicle, I understand.
Yes, and so it's it's quite a creation from start to, well, not quite finished yet, but it's still growing.
There was actually two versions of it.
Yeah, and this is the second version. The first version was actually built too high, had too much weight. It's the vehicle you couldn't get out of its own way.
There's
So
point
we
three.
ended up we ended up with a regular RV, a 30-foot RV, and we kind of gutted it out. We put the equipment in there. Actually built a Faraday cage around it. Believe it or not, it's a metal mesh built within the walls, the floors, the ceiling,
And
and once everything's
just
closed,
explain why you would build a Faraday cage, just for our
yeah.
audience.
So a Faraday cage was basically to isolate the equipment from any external EMI, external emissions, radio emissions. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't influencing our measurements. Like I said, once this thing is closed up, everything from the external, even cell phones, your cell phone signal would pretty much die out once the door is closed. And this was necessary in order to safeguard our data. We collected a lot of data over that period of time, and we found early on that even some of the acoustic data was being interfered with radio frequencies, because you got 5G cell towers down there they're working at these momentary high power levels, these peak power levels, and they could actually induce a radio frequency into a microphone, and it would sound like audio. It would sound like it's an acoustic tone, but it's not. It's actually being picked up by the EMI.
So the crucially important thing here is that, like the US Navy with the Nimitz incident, you've not just taken video and used the A1 human eyeball to witness these objects.
Mm-hmm.
You've also used hyperspectral imaging cameras. You've got wideband marine radars, which you've actually got two, so you can cross-reference. You can, what do you call, triangulate those radars for more
Yeah.
accurate image. You've got different types of UV camera, infrared camera. Give me, what else have you got? Like, I mean, how much
So
did this cost you? It must have been a phenomenal amount of money to even buy a
it's
hyperspectral camera.
It was approximately probably about close to $250,000.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more by this time. It's
And of
probably
course, we
closer
kept
to about
spending after that.
275, but
Updating.
it's, of course, we're continually updating the course, and a lot of it came out of my retirement.
I was about to say, what do your long-suffering wives say about you spending the retirement fund on this UAP passion project?
She says you better get busy with this project.
Luckily, we did get a funder that helped us.
Yes, that's true.
Because that money was running low. We did get a funder who believed in what we were doing, and he funded us the rest of the way to finish up the phase one project.
Right. It was the same funder that helped with the Galileo project with Harvard University.
Do you want to acknowledge that funder if they want to be publicly acknowledged? I think it's important.
I would love to. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal person. His name is Eugene Jung, and
great human being.
Yeah, great human being, and he's got a big interest in this stuff and science in general, and promoting it and the cause. And he's also been very helpful during the virus outbreak. He's helped a lot of different causes. But he's given a lot. He's given a lot back to society.
Donna?
A lot of money was spent for phase one study. A lot of money is needed to continue phase two and beyond. But there are university endeavors right now at the university level trying to approach some of the same objectives we have. And we have results. We have data. We have a published paper. We have a book. And we're continuing to look for funding for the phase 2 study, which we have a lot of new objectives that we'd like to tackle. And some of these other university endeavors are asking for millions, have received millions. And so we were able to fulfill the phase 1 study with data that was recognized in a scientific journal and has attracted the interest of the FBI's expressed an interest in our work. State and local government has expressed an interest in our work. First responders, we're working, collaborating with them. It goes on and on and on. And
Yeah.
we've updated the academic community, who also has been very supportive.
Mhm.
But we've not received any funding, the same type of funding at the level of the academic endeavor.
Right, and we remain transparent too to everything that we find. Any finding that we have, it's we're trying to be transparent, and we like collaboration and feedback from other, from academia, especially, there's other professionals. There's we work with pilots, and of course, law enforcement and that sort of thing. But it's not something that we want to keep under wraps, and we try to get that information out there. And early on we did it through a book.
So to finish my point, we do these types of studies evidently at a fraction of the cost and produce results. We hope also in the second phase. And
I totally agree with you, Donna. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so keen to get you guys on is because what you've shown is that good citizen science can actually make breakthroughs. I find the work that you've done very, very exciting. And I want to get into the nitty gritty of that now. One of the things that you talk about in your report, your radio frequency report, is that there's a spike at 4.06 gigahertz. And it doesn't seem to be a broadband frequency. It's not anything like Wi-Fi, 4G or 5G. Do you think that spike is associated with the anomalous phenomenon that you've been videoing?
It's hard to say. We're unfortunately you know we're nearby, cell towers, 5G cell towers that are giving out pretty strong signals, and a lot of them. Some of these signals are spread spectrum. They're random, but there are a couple of signals that during times of higher traffic with the observations, we've noticed carriers around 1.6 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz. And these are the signals that we're really kind of focusing on at this point. Some of the other signals, they could be GPS. There are law enforcement communications as well that we're intercepting, but it's at times it's very difficult to isolate the background noise from all these other signals. Like I said, the ones that we're really focused on right now is the two in particular, which is the 3 and the 1.6.
So you are seeing something in the 3 gigahertz range, which of course is a well-known mysterious range.
Yes, yes,
and we're seeing it correlates actually when these objects seem to appear.
right.
So the 3 gigahertz range that's been, I think it's also the range that's been picked up at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. You're seeing something anomalous in that frequency range as well.
Right. And what's tricky about that signal too is that there's some radar, especially where we're close to the water. There's ships that use a very similar frequency range, which is S-band radar. S-band radar is anywhere between 2.9 and 3.1 gigahertz. So we're very careful as to try to isolate that from these erroneous signals that we've been getting. And there are times that these ships are not within 36 miles of our location, and we're still receiving some of these signals with this higher activity.
Yep.
Now, I want to squeeze into this program as many of the videos and images as possible so that our audience can see some of the excellent work that you've done. You see 4 orb objects over the ocean from the beach. Just talk me through what we're seeing on that video. Can you just describe it to me? What are we seeing on that video? One appears to be in the water. There's an object either in the water or just above it. And then
Okay.
I think it's you, John. You say there's a shadow of something dark that you can see at the back. And then
I believe that was Gerry.
Yeah.
that was Gerry.
Actually, that particular shadow is actually an artifact produced by the IR. It's almost
Right.
what the mountain climbers called Brock inspectors, but in our case, it's produced by an IR instead of a fog.
But there was something anomalous that happened.
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Yes, there's what you talk about. We actually saw an orb of light. So one of the spheroids we're talking about. There was one hovering low over the water. It was actually casting a reflection on the water. And it was changing its elevation periodically. It was also changing its spin rate. As it spun faster, it increased its luminosity. As it decreased its spin rate, the luminosity would drop, and you would almost start to see that polyhedral appearance. There was also about four or five other objects that appeared, and all of them were in different spectral ranges. The only one that was visible was the one on the water, and this is what we thought maybe some kind of signature management or their ability to change spectral
Right.
range.
The objects that were basically over the water, low over the horizon, were in the infrared. They were being detected in the infrared. They couldn't be seen visibly by any of us. The only object that we could see clearly and it was very visible was the object that was over the water. We approximated it was roughly about 13 feet, and it was casting a light that was the seas were pretty calm at that point, and you could see this rotation of this light under the object itself.
It was very intense, very intense.
There's another video 4. It's an orb with satellites. A big purplish orb has a whole lot of little orbs around it, and they're strobing like crazy. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary video. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, that's one that would appeared off the shoreline. We noticed the large orb in the middle was actually we could actually make that out visibly. It was both in the visible and IR range. The smaller orbs, or the smaller satellite orbs, were all in the infrared. Those we couldn't see with our eyes.
Right, and something else I want to say too is that we were tracking this on the main monitor, the main video monitor inside the RV. And what we do is we want to make sure that these are not star constellation, part of a constellation star pattern. So we used stellarium mapping, and there's a couple of other utilities we used as well out there in the field. And what we'll do is we use a dry erase marker. We'll actually mark the positions on the monitor, which is fixed at that point, and we'll look for this change in the movement of the stars. With the rotation of the Earth. These objects would remain fixed for long periods of time, and we knew right away that they weren't stars. I think there's been researchers in the past that have called them pseudo stars.
Now, the other thing I noticed about that video is you describe an anomalous battery drain on video 4.
Yes.
So what happened?
When we were out there, these were relatively close to the shoreline and weren't that far. Some of the hyperspectral cameras we had a full battery drain, and we had checked the batteries before we went out there. So that was something we couldn't explain, and that's happened several times when we have these kinds of encounters.
Now, this is obviously a very common phenomenon with people who try to record with cameras anomalous phenomena. It seems to be able to screw back with us by draining our electrical devices. How often did that happen to you?
Probably at least half a dozen times, maybe.
Yeah, maybe over the period of 2 years, at least six times that we were pretty sure how charged with the charge state of the batteries. And there's no reason that the batteries should have discharged as quickly as they did.
You actually had a time where we actually had a complete power failure, even the generator cut out.
Yes.
Well, that's that famous scene in Close Encounters, isn't it? Where the craft appears and then everything goes dead. I have to admit, there are times in your videos where even you guys sound like you're pretty seasoned observers, all three of you. But there's times when all of you sound a bit freaked out as the objects are coming towards
we were. And it happened often. We were spooked.
It's like an episode of Blair Witch Project. It's quite funny because on video 20, you see the three objects in a distance. It's about 12:30 at night, so it's dark. It's the witching hour. And I think, John, you say on the audio, we just had a close encounter. It came right up to us on the beach. We ran like a bunch of pussies.
Excuse the language.
It was an embarrassing moment for us. It wasn't our high point.
But the bit I liked was that was effing unbelievable. Clearly, it had a huge effect on you. What you're seeing with your eyeball is more dramatic than what you're capturing with your camera.
Yes, yes, that that was an event that happened in the roughly in the end of the second month of our research.
It was August 28th, 2022.
Yeah, and
I remember the date.
Right, it happened just after midnight. It was 12:15 when we actually had the encounter. But there was a triangular formation of. We weren't sure if it was a part of one object, but I would say that right now the consensus is that there was three separate objects.
Well, we confirmed it because when we watched that video the second time around after the recordings were made, is we had panned over to the right, and the objects actually separated, and they rose in elevation. There was a bright red flash, and all the objects were gone.
And they disappeared. Yeah. So, but they remained stable out there for almost 45 minutes. That pattern, and that night, we had wind gusts of greater than 35 miles per hour. So, for something to remain as stable as it was, I mean, it wasn't drones, it wasn't balloons, it wasn't
these weren't
any
fixed,
of that stuff.
These weren't fixed positions, and even a helicopter, you're going to have movement with those kind of winds. You're not going to have something.
No sound at all, and nothing visible, nothing in the visible light. It was all in the infrared.
There's one particularly interesting video. I think it's first shown in video 5. It's called Merging Sky Objects with Cohension. And you see a large glowing object that seems to be flickering, and then it moves up and perhaps into another object that seems to be hidden inside the cloud. Can you talk me through that one?
Yes, that one caught us by surprise. We were nearing an area called Democrat Point. And I had been videotaping an object up there, and the object it seemed to have rotation to it. It was giving off like a kaleidoscope of color as it was rotating. And tracking the object, I realized that there was another source of light that was coming down from the cloud layers, and it was getting sharper and sharper, and it seemed to form the same shape as the object that I was visualizing up to that point. And the object never really did come down from the cloud layer, but you could see the brightness, intensity of it. And then this object that I had been tracking seemed like it cohesed or fused with the other object, and they synchronized rotation together. You could see it was twice its size, and they were rotating in the same direction. And then both objects just moved up into the cloud layers, and that was it. We didn't see anything further. But we went frame by frame. We analyzed the tape, the video on it, and I'm dating myself. I keep saying tape. The digital recording, and you could see that, within these frames, you could see that these objects almost, if they weren't cohesed, they're extremely close together when they synchronized rotation.
So one of the questions I should have asked you early on is, you've got these two radars, and what's the benefit of having two radars? And a further question on this question is, how often were you able to confirm that the objects that you were seeing were solid enough to register on radar?
Right. I'll start it out. We have two radars on top of the vehicle. We have one in a horizontal axis and one on a vertical axis. And the reason being is we've got a better cross section of the object. One gets higher elevation, one is vertically mounted. The horizontal one gets a wider sweep and azimuth.
Yeah. So the X-band radar, what we want to do is we want to capture distant ships out there. We're going into phase 2, and we're seeing some anomalous reflections that they're called anomalous propagations. There's something that was discovered back in the 1920s. Of a reflected signal using radar system, even the early radar systems, that would not lose energy. They would be reflected back, and the intensity was the same. If a reflected radio wave would bounced off in the ionosphere and came back late, the intensity level, the energy levels would be quite a bit lower than the actual transmitted signal. This is something that we've been seeing on a regular basis.
Can I just ask, though, very quickly, have you been able to get radar tracks of some of these anomalous objects to confirm that they are delivering a radar image? They're solid enough to deliver a radar image?
what we get is we get solid. They're intermittent. The context we get, but they correlate with what we're seeing on the hyperspectral cameras. They'll appear in the same areas.
Right, at times, and then you'll see reflections in totally different locations, but they don't remain. They don't remain with a continuous sweep. You know, it's you'll see these objects that you'll see one sweep that the object will be there. And they're color coded. The screen itself, the echo trails are red. You know, we have red defined as a solid reflection. When you're doing rain studies or you're doing precipitation, you know, you'll have a color, maybe green or orange, indicating that the density is not there. And then these objects are solid. These are solid returns, but they're
That's
not there all the time.
that's what I was coming to. So these aren't rain clouds. They're not biomass.
No,
They're not
no,
birds out over the
no,
ocean. They're
no.
not insect swarms.
Nope.
You've been able to exclude those prosaic explanations.
Yes.
Right, right, and we'll adjust the clutter settings on the radar, make sure that we're not getting C clutter. You know, sometimes wave heights can interfere with the radar signal. We're also able to tilt the radar. We have an actuator, an arm that actually tilts the antenna, the radome antenna. So we're looking straight up into the sky at times. We can adjust that level.
The other things we're also looking at the ADSB software, so we're tracking, you know,
Commercial traffic.
commercial traffic transmissions, so we can visualize that on a monitor. The other thing is for biomass, we could see that with hyperspectral cameras very easily.
And we're also tracking the merchant ships out there as well with marine apps.
It's called MARAPS.
MARAPS. So we're watching for all these things and trying to identify as much as we can identify.
I really admire what you guys have done, you know, because I've actually priced a hyperspectral camera, and from memory, they're about $50,000. You know, they're they're a very expensive piece of kit. You really have put your heart and soul into this as a scientific project, haven't you?
We have,
yeah, we put our best in it.
It's a big investment in equipment and a huge dedication. I mean, just to be out there, you know, for hours at a time, sometimes not seeing anything, and it's you know, you got to be patient. You got to be vigilant as far as
especially with researchers like Donna, and we had some other researchers out there, but they're not being paid. They're out there volunteering their time for 12 hours all night long.
That's right. You know.
So listen, I know you boys have had your own weird experience in your youth, and I'm going to ask you both whether you've ever seen a UFO before this Long Island project. But I'm going to go to Donna first. Donna, are you an experiencer? Have you had any experience with the phenomenon yourself before this research?
Absolutely. Right now, I live on a hill on Long Island, off the North Shore, but not directly on the North Shore. And I've seen things in the sky here. I've seen orbs of many kinds, luminous orbs in the distance, and I've also seen people just seeing a red orb. I don't see a red orb. I saw a red orange orb that actually appeared to travel through the trees, and I watched it from window to window on the south side of my home, and I actually saw it. This was like before 12 midnight, and this was a few years ago, maybe 2015, and I actually saw it land on the house kitty quarter to mine across the street. And I tried to wake everyone in my household up, and no one cared. Everyone thought they were dreaming or I was dreaming. And so that's happened quite a few times where I've seen orbs. Usually they are of the luminescent variety, but this one was red orange, like a fluorescent red orange. And it was pretty sizable, though I'm not adept at sizing it correctly. And then, of course, I had a hitchhiker effect during the course of study with John and Gerry. John did as well. And I saw for the first time, and a small orb woke me up right in my bedroom, which was very dimly lit. And it wasn't a very bright orb, and it was a very small orb, about 6 inches in diameter. But I opened my eyes, and there it was, you know, just a few feet from my face. And I watched it move across the wall from my door to the closet area. And then I was just telepathically communicating with it because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought that it was important because I had not seen such a phenomena before. And I thought, wow, I'm learning a lot about high strangeness. And it's really, the more you open that trap, the more you see, you notice, maybe because your mind is tuned into it. And it wasn't, like I said, the light wasn't very light. It had very low albedo. But even though it had low albedo, it was only there less than a minute. And I saw it actually dim further than it already was, and I was sad. This all happened very quickly, and I was sad because I felt like it would, whatever it was departing, and which it did. But I wished it a message. I said, I hope you come back, and I get to know who or what you are. I didn't know any other way to communicate with it other than as a human,
Did it talk back?
but object or an animate object. I'm not sure,
Did
but
it
that
talk?
was
Did it talk back, Donna?
no, and I didn't. I don't think I received any message. I don't feel I've received any return messages, but I don't feel that I felt any negative feeling in return. If anything, it was lukewarm or positive. So I'm still hopeful. And maybe tonight when I retire and go to bed, I'll wish it back.
Now,
We did
Gerry and
we,
John, there's a really interesting story that I understand you have from when you were younger boys as twins, and there was a very strange visitor came to your door. Are we talking about a Men in Black?
Well, something is interesting is I compare him to I don't know if you ever saw The Exorcist, the trailer for The Exorcist when the priest shows up with the dark suit and the fedora hat, and he knocks at the door and it's very foggy out.
that's
It was a trailer for the Exorcist, but that's what this guy looked like. He was in this dark suit, he had a fedora hat, and he claimed he was working with an exterminating company called Slugabug. The only thing is
if you can believe that.
Yeah, the other thing is he invited himself in. Of course, we were young, and we had a friend over there that was older than we were, and she let him in. So he sat himself down in the living room and he started talking about. He had a suitcase full of materials on UFOs and Edgar Casey and various paranormal phenomena. And he started to talk to us about the phenomena. He would talk to my older brother and say that he saw him as a psychic sensitive or someone who was very intuitive, and he talked about paths we may take in life related to this.
Yeah. And the odd thing about it is none of us could remember any physical attributes about this character.
Couldn't remember what he looked like.
I remember the hat. He had removed his hat, but I cannot remember what he looked like, and none of us could. We could.
How old were
we
you at
talked
the
about it
time?
many times. I would say probably maybe 7 years old at the time. It was
7 or 8.
Seven or
Pat was maybe 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was.
The cool bit I like is you did your own research into Slugabug, which is a great name, by the way, for a pest extermination
Yes.
service. Is there a Slugabug?
There was a slugabug in Florida.
But much later, decades later.
Decades later in Florida, but nobody
no
under that name, and I know the authorities were called in at that time, to investigate it, and nobody else saw this character. And I remember when he left, we had quickly, looked out the windows and the door to see if he got into a car and that sort of thing. We never did see what vehicle he arrived in.
He was just gone. He was just gone.
He walked, but if he walked, he walked very fast.
And
like I said,
when you
not
boys,
remembering the attributes.
when you were twin boys, presumably reading comics and watching bad TV, were you also interested in UAPs? Did you have any paranormal experiences as kids apart from that weird man in trilby hat Men in Black incident?
Yes, we have. As twins, maybe it's more an occurrence with twins, but we've had shared dreams. We've had premonitions that I felt at the time. I don't have them as many of these occurrences now, but as a kid, I remember seeing things that a day or two or a week later they would come to be.
Can I ask you this? Do you think the reason why the phenomenon has shown itself to all three of you may have something, and I'm inviting you to speculate, do you think it may have something to do with the fact that your minds were twigged as young people with the fact that there is something out there that is anomalous and is paranormal? Do you have to have a switch flicked in your head to make you even aware of the existence of this phenomenon?
That
If
was
you
that
look
was
at,
an idea we were considering.
they do have
Uh,
experience, like Gary Nolan. A lot of the people who are in
yeah,
the
That's
world,
true too. Yeah,
I
we've
was
and
thinking
we've
of Gary. I mean, I know Gary's come out and looked at your project and been very impressed. And he
yes.
had his own paranormal experience as I think, an 11-year-old newspaper boy.
Mhm.
He had a gigantic craft hover over him, and he had a kind of a kundalini experience, a vibration experience in his bedroom. Um, what what intrigues me is the possibility that you were sought out by that weird character all those years ago when you were 7-year-old boys, and that might have directed the course of your research. Did you ever think about that?
We've always wondered about that. Yeah.
we did actually wonder about that. I mean, that kind of got our interest going in things like UFOs or paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, it kind of paved the way. I mean, even looking into technology and so forth, the kind of careers that we chose later on
Yeah,
was
one of the technical careers, because
technical science
we wanted to
related.
understand these things in some way.
Right. And we've always had that interest.
they tell this story because it's very pivotal in their life. And
Mhm.
so before they even knew that there would be a Nightcrawler research platform, they they told me this story years ago. So it made an impression on them, and I think it did fashion them to have an interest in
You
the exact
pointed that
phenomenon.
direction.
Yeah, I know this one will drive the debunkers crazy, but I do wonder sometimes whether there is a consciousness that's going around twigging people like yourselves, inserting ideas into your head in dreams or in, semi-waking states, and implanting the idea, you guys should take an interest in UAPs, UFOs. I suspect it's not a coincidence that you've got this interest. One thing I want to move to is the five observables. Lou Elizondo talks about the five observables, the various phenomena, the anomalous phenomena signs. And one of the videos that you've got appears to show one of those observables, video 6, NIR water orb and hovering orbs. You see an orb seemingly moving in and out of the water, which suggests that whatever these objects are, they're transmedium. Do you agree?
Yes, because we had a couple of instances where with some of these objects we had noted them touching down on the water, and they would to seem to pass through the water without disturbing the water, which was interesting.
Yeah, and we recorded that several times. We used in that case. We used we have a camera. One of the hyperspectral cameras is Swire. It's a shortwave infrared, and what that gives us is it's the water has a high absorption rate at that wavelength, so it comes up black. There's nothing else you can see other than the dark ocean. But if there's an object that is on top of that water, it's seen very clearly in Swire. We can see that object, and if it submerges like we believe it didn't disturb the water. It just kind of shrunk in size, and it seemed to be under the water.
So you do think it actually went into the water and showed no visible. What I'm looking for is it showed no visible disturbance to the surface of the
Yes,
water as it entered.
Exactly. That's what we
yeah,
that's what we
we noted
believe.
we haven't seen any disturbance of the water, which was very odd.
There's another document which I think is really important, and it shows a disc-shaped object, almost a craft-looking object. It has the purplish glow that we were talking about earlier. And if I'm not mistaken, in this still image, it shows a bright underlight. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Is this
I think it's a still picture. They look like a square inside the circle.
Yes, that's right.
That's the one we that's the still frame.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a still frame. That was from the observation in August 28th. That was the encounter that we had at the time. There was an object that under the triangle. There was an object that seemed to uh, literally fall out of the sky, and Donna observed it first, and we were able to track it with the cameras, the infrared cameras, the night vision cameras, and this object seemed to move closer to our location, to the shoreline, and then back off again. And what we ended up doing was we were hitting it with a visible torch, 100,000 lumen light, and we were all able to see the reflection. It was no longer infrared. We could see the reflections from the flashlight, and I was able to take still images from it and enhance those images. And it appears like there's some kind of an opaque or translucent dome around a polyhedral shape in the center of it.
That's what excited me about that still video, and you see a small orb that comes out from a distant triangle, and it's coming towards you on the
Yeah,
beach.
yeah,
And
yes.
John, you light it up with a gigantically powerful torch.
Yes, and with there was four of us out there that night. There was we had Donna, we had Sue, Gerald, and myself, and we all had our hyperspectral cameras. We had the night vision cameras with us, and once I hit the object, once I hit the object with the light, everybody was able to see these objects. And I think Donna can, you can attest to that also. That the object was giving off a reflection.
But
That was.
my goggles, my IR goggles, failed.
Mhm. Oh, that's right. Her particular.
Those
Yeah, during an incident with Donna Stoker, three of
Uh,
our cameras.
One thing I want to caution is if you talk over each other, you audio sound deaden the other person. So
Exactly.
can I just get Donna's account, please?
Well, while John and Gerry were having this encounter, Sue, she's a registered nurse, and I were prepping the Nightcrawler for other other protocols, and we actually at some point heard a scuffle, and we looked and we saw John and Gerry running, but not fast because they couldn't. It was beach sand they were running through. We were parked right at the opening of the cut, and I knew, and so did Sue, that something had happened, but we had no idea until John and Gerry calmed down and told us what had happened. That they had spotted something in the sky. Something came out of the water. They both one fell, then the other fell. Temporarily, they could not move. Then they were able to get up. They thought maybe this was a weapon. They weren't sure, so they wanted to get back to the Nightcrawler. And so we saw them. We heard them huffing and puffing. Then we saw them, and we realized that they were distressed, so something was up. And so they updated us. And then I don't know. We spent like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes discussing it. And then we all hightailed it back to the beach. And we still saw that formation, those 3 points of light, but not with the eye at all, only with the working cameras, because my goggles had failed back at the Nightcrawler for a reason I don't know why. And then there were other failures that night. So you do get that. You get the battery drains, and we did also experience equipment failure for no reason.
And so, John and Gerry, that's where the comment was made. You guys were obviously very upset about what had happened. You'd been paralyzed. And so that's
Totally.
why you ran like a bunch of.
Yeah.
Pretty, yeah,
Exactly.
I'd say pretty much.
So
And
describe to me, John and Gerry, what happened when you were actually paralyzed, presumably by this object that came towards the beach?
I mean, it's not something even today we can't really wrap our heads around as far as uh, what came over us, what it was that produced that effect, but it was a physical effect. It was a biological effect. You know, I tried to move away from it. I had observed a rectangular beam of light that was being it seemed to reflect my IR rangefinder on my lunar optics night vision. And every 1 second flash, I could see this object getting much closer to our location. Finally, it overloaded the cameras. The cameras were washed out with it looked to me like the infrared light. When I pulled the camera down, I couldn't see anything other than just sky. But in the cameras were actually overloaded by some kind of an infrared radiation, infrared energy. And as I turned to move away from the shore, I said to my brother, I said it's on top of us. And as I turned, my legs gave out. I collapsed. I just collapsed onto the sand, and I couldn't coordinate my legs under me to pick myself back up.
And this happened to both of you?
Yeah,
Gerald,
when I heard John yell and that he couldn't get up, he couldn't move. I didn't understand it, so I tried to pull him back up, and he was starting to regain his strength. It was less than a minute. The effect. Then I collapsed, and I lost all strength and muscle tone in my legs. I couldn't do the same. I couldn't coordinate my legs underneath. I'd use my arms to actually pull myself in the sand. And while this was happening, there was something happening to our camera, which the camera was working intermittently, but it recorded an event. It recorded something that entered the optics, some sphere of light that got beyond the iris of the camera, which is
bizarre because the iris, you know, I was used to be a camera technician. I used to repair these cameras, service these cameras before engineering, and the intensity of the light, you know, with the iris motor, you have a diaphragm in there that closes down, and it closes down instantly if there's intense light to protect the CCD. So it's a loop that the gain control that actually shuts this stuff down and adjusts the light level coming in. This seemed to be working. The iris motor seemed to be working, but the intensity of the light was beyond. It looked like it was beyond the iris motor when we looked at the playback. Almost looked like there was an intense form of light inside, just beyond the iris motor.
So you know what I mean by the sixth observable. There's a lot of talk that there's not 5 observables, there's 6, and the sixth observable is biological effects. You guys may, in fact, have suffered the biological effects of a UAP.
It could be.
That's what we believe.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no other cause. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. The two of us experienced the same thing, and it wasn't just bio effects on us. When we were looking at the object, when that object finally disappeared, there were 2 crustaceans on the beach, a krill and a shrimp. They were both glowing intense luminosity in the IR range, and we collected those 2 specimens. They were a few feet from where we experienced this incident, and they were supercharged with this IR energy, which makes no sense.
What could possibly cause that?
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't bioluminescence. Bioluminescence occurs at a frequency of 450 to maybe 577 nanometers. That's in the visible spectrum. These things were, the wavelength. These were in the infrared, and that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, so they were dead, these creatures?
They were dead, and we had brought them back in the specimen.
Desecrated, you said.
They were dead. We brought them back in the specimen container, and I had examined them under a microscope. They were desiccated. Both of them had large openings in their thorax. It looked like the internal organs avulsed. It looked like a thermal expansion effect of the insides being bursted out.
So there are so many incidents, and I could keep on going all day, guys, but honestly, there are so many incidents in what you've described and shot in your videos. There is one that intrigued me, though, because it's actually not over the beach. It's video 36, Holbrook incident, and you see a huge light over a backyard. What's that story?
Okay, so this is what we think is another example of a hitchhiker effect. And this time was videotaped on the cameras of the RV. I'll let John explain.
Right. So we had gone out there earlier in the night and had returned home at, I guess, around 1:30. And I live roughly about 25 minutes from the research location at Rob Moses State Park. So the vehicle had the cameras running. There's 4 different cameras. They're night vision cameras, fixed cameras on the platform on the RV. And each one is at different positions: the passenger side, the driver's, the front and back. And they were recording overnight. And within about 2 hours of the vehicle being parked, I had turned into bed, and we noticed that, the next day I checked the video because it was giving an indication that it recorded something. And I checked the recording, and it started out with we have 3 street lights over the vehicle. One was in front, roughly about 300 feet ahead. There was a street light behind the vehicle, directly behind, literally over the RV. And there was another street light on the passenger side that was probably another maybe 200 feet away from it. And all 3 street lights shut down at the same time that night. And you could see an interference pattern developing in the video cameras, almost like it's a radio frequency interference of some sort, electromagnetic interference. And you'd see on the back of the frame structure of the RV, where the camera was overlooking, you'd see a blue light appear. And the blue light grew, got brighter and brighter, turned into white light. And and it would just remain there for a period of time, and then you could see slowly. You could see the streetlights recover one after another very quickly, sequentially. And the only thing I can do that, these are, I believe, they're sodium vapor lights, and they have on top of the top hats on these hoods of the lamps. There's a photo sensor, and that photo sensor is designed to sense sunlight in the morning and shut the lights down. So something in the, I believe it was in the infrared spectrum, had triggered those sensors are also sensitive to the infrared, the near infrared. So it tripped those sensors, and all those lights shut down at the same time.
Not only were you followed home by whatever the phenomenon is, it was also not visible. The only reason you were able to see this is because you had the cameras that can see in that infrared spectrum.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And another interesting thing is the only way you can shut these photo sensors down is that light has to be above those hoods.
The hoods, yeah. I mean, the photo sensors are straight up. They're vertical. They're at a zenith to the sky.
Right. Donna, one of the things I'm interested in is, here are you guys off the coast of Long Island gathering 50 at least extraordinary videos of anomalous incidents. Have there been, and I know there's been times where you've wondered whether somebody else is taking an interest in what you're recording? Have there been unknown planes around the area during the period when you've been filming, perhaps also taking an interest in the phenomenon that you're observing?
Well, I would say none that we were really able to identify, although there was one day, and this again was back in August 2022, so that would be the second month into the phase one study, where John witnessed some extraordinary activity. And John and Gerry and I, we had already reported to the park police and other local officials, local only, that we had seen some strange things already in the sky with IR equipment, and did they know what this could be? And we were looking into what the drone laws were and that information. And John saw some craft in the sky, and he saw search beams that were focusing on the sky, not on the ocean. So if it's Coast Guard, you would be able to get radar hits. If it was Coast Guard, they would be focusing on the water. So we thought that that was very unusual, and we thought, well, what timing? The week before, we had went to the park police and let them know that we are seeing something that we have not yet been able to categorize or identify.
John and Gerry, there's one video I'm interested in, video 9, and it's the 16th of January 2023, and there appears to be an unknown plane adjacent to orbs that you're taking an interest in. Do you know the one I mean?
Was that the Tic Tac?
Yeah,
That might have been the Tic Tac video.
No, it was a nighttime image, and it seems to be an aircraft that's adjacent to orbs. So it's
Okay, yeah, I think you're talking about the aircraft that we used the 60 times zoom. We zoomed in on it. It looked like a small dot of light. We wanted to identify it, so at 60 times zoom, we could easily see an aircraft and its navigation
fuselage.
So we saw this aircraft, and then what we noticed was about four orbs of light, almost looked like fireballs that were trailing it. And we had watched to see if the aspect ratio would change, so we'd see maybe the navigation lights were hidden, but these never showed any navigation light. These lights, these four orbs of light. The plane though was very obvious with the navigation light. So these things we couldn't identify.
Right, and they would seem to be in the flight path of the plane as well.
So that's the thing that interests me about all of this. Let's do a closer, if you like, because I've gone way over time, but I've been so fascinated by what you've told me, and thank you so much for sharing it.
No problem.
What I find fascinating about all of this is we are talking about an extraordinarily sensitive and busy area of airspace in the continental United States. It's probably one of the most busy areas of airspace, both military and civilian. Do you agree that categorically what you are recording raises flight safety and national security issues?
Oh, absolutely. I believe so.
There was an interesting incident that occurred. I think it was during the 1990s. The Flight 800 crash.
I covered
Right.
that story, TWA 800. Yeah,
Yeah.
they put the crash down to kept on wiring arcing inside the fuel tank. I did a whole
Right,
That
the
was,
story.
and
center,
that, but
the
there was
centrifugal tank.
right, and that was never determined as a certainty. That was the educated guess of the National Transportation Safety Board. But they know that the explosion that started started in the center fuel tank. Now the interesting thing is that can also happen from an impact. Is that there were like maybe 700 witnesses, approximately around that number, who saw a flash of light heading up towards the plane. Obviously, they told people that they were
And
their
and
perception was off.
can I tell you, boys, I'm so pleased you raised this because I was scared to raise it in case I sound like a nutty conspiracy theorist. I covered that story and I interviewed people about the crash of TWA 800. And I remember speaking to people telling me that they saw a flash of light coming up towards the aircraft. And it was very quickly shut down in the NTSB investigation.
Mhm,
And there were,
mhm,
obviously there was this argument that it was a problem with very badly covered wiring. They didn't have Teflon coating on the wiring in the proper way, so it cracked
mhm,
and caused an arc.
mhm.
But yes, there is a question mark in my mind that this is the area for where one of the most mysterious aircraft crashes of
Exactly.
all time took place, right in
Yep.
this flight path area, and it's never been properly explained. I think we should just leave it as an open question whether
Right.
there
Mhm.
was perhaps a collision with an anomalous object.
It's certainly something that should be considered
Yeah,
as a
absolutely.
possibility.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was within about less than 7 miles of where we were
And
doing research.
it's out rare we're seeing these objects, and of course, could have been a collision, maybe even an accidental collision. It's possible.
Sure. And I know you guys can't talk about it because you've been asked not to, but my own sources in the FBI are telling me that the feds are taking a very, very close interest in your work. And I know you're talking about a new phase to your study. What's next?
Yes.
Are you going to go out on boats? Are you going to be using drones? What's the next phase of your study?
Well,
John had summarized it. He could probably.
we initiated a phase. So we actually started, of course, this is a point now in time where, you know, we're experiencing some funding issues and so forth, getting the ARV out there and getting enough volunteers and so forth to spend time with it. But you know, phase two is going to involve, which actually has involved already, is remotely operated hyperspectral camera systems. So these camera systems can be visualized or viewed from any location.
And they're fully integrated with a small millimeter wave radar
Right, and
systems.
they all contain a millimeter wave radar system, which gives a 3 mile range in the line of sight and in the visual range of the cameras. So as a detecting source, the cameras can be tracked. There's a pan and tilt operation on some models of it, but they can be put in areas that we have no access to or we're not frequented to, or popular areas, maybe areas that have higher incidences of these sightings, and utilized, to try to identify the possibility of whether or not we need to send a laboratory to that particular location and do a full length study. Um, Again, this is, we're also using extensive use of millimeter wave radar because we kind of suspect that what we're getting back on some of these returns is that there's a delay in the signal, and this is something, like I said, it's been talked about since the 1920s. We're just wondering why, and we've had a couple of really interesting radar anomalies where we would use the background ships in the background that were basically 9-12 miles out and use that as a reference, and our returns would show elongated track patterns, almost like they were being delayed because we have a mechanical circulating radar system.
And
So
just
we're
to,
using
and just to emphasize the point that you were making, one possible explanation for those delays is gravitational lensing.
exactly. That's what we're kind of suspecting this point. So we have
And
equipment.
what would cause gravitational lensing? Let's take this to its logical conclusion. Some kind of propulsion device,
Some
perhaps?
kind of propulsion system, and which correlates, we believe, with these odd frequencies that we've been getting as well.
Wow.
So we're trying to put this all together as a means of detection of these objects, using fixed system satellites, using GPS locators and that sort of thing, because the same would happen to any radio signal as well as light, in the full electromagnetic spectrum. We can see the same distortion with LiDAR.
John, Gerry, and Donna, I just want to take my hat off to you guys. What the work that you have done is exceptional. It's
Thank you.
astonishing, and
Thank you.
it exemplifies everything that I think all of us want to see in citizen science trying to validate and investigate the phenomenon. So, congratulations to you. And I think I speak for everybody watching this. We really are excited by the work that you're doing. If I can promote or assist in any way in helping you get further publicity on this issue, please let me know. I'm very, very excited by the methodical quality science that you've done here. I'll be interested to see how the splenetic debunkers deal with your work, because you've done some phenomenal research. And my hearty congratulations to you. I'll get spanked by NewsNation for letting this go on so long, but the
Thank you,
bottom
Ross.
line is I've loved this conversation, and I want to
It
do
was
it
a lot
again.
of fun for
So
us.
Yes.
keep in
And
touch.
we appreciate all the support. Tom.
Yes, we're very happy to be on your show and
Absolutely.
participate in this. This is great.
Thank you so much for talking to Reality Check, and we'll have you back on again soon. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.